We can gain muscle and lose fat at the same time almost indefinitely. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. And when I say this, I want to be clear, I'm not saying this is always going to be super fast. What I'm saying is that when we observe both the real world, we observe the anecdote, the fact that plenty of people out there historically have stayed very lean while making gains, like even competitive bodybuilders. Plenty of athletes do this stuff year round. This is fairly normal. And we accept that, again, we start looking at the scientific evidence that's out there. You start looking at protein overfeeding studies. Okay, we start looking at the data on calorie surpluses, calorie deficits, and we start finding some trends here. And really those trends are multifold in nature. All right, number one, we actually do seem to adapt to some extent with minor metabolic adaptations, to calorie intakes. Okay, so in other words, if we're not really truly bulking or cutting, our maintenance will tend to adjust to some extent based around our muscle gain, physical activity. So again, this idea that people have that they need to always be force feeding or way under eating to see some gradual changes is just simply not true. Okay, and plenty of people, extremely successful, even physique competitors and athletes, don't even really track their calories, right? They just focus on, again, keeping their calories relatively high, eating very clean, eating lots and lots and lots of protein. And the point I'm going to make here is that as long as we're eating in a manner that's not causing us to gain body fat, we're not force feeding anything, we're not eating a bunch of junk, or so we keep our metabolic health healthy, we're probably not going to really gain body fat. And we're not going to see, again, these large surpluses and stuff appear in our diet. And by that same token, if we do kind of go into a deficit, we just tend to lose fat if it just happens gradually. In other words, your appetite goes down based on energy turnovers, you're fairly active, high thermic effect of protein, and you're training hard, you don't start losing muscle. That's the beauty of it. If these other things are dialed in, so the scale will go down a little bit, but if we're not losing muscle, we'll just see a downregulation in NEAT to some extent, meaning people don't need to worry about this stuff quite to the degree that they think they do. So like what I recommend is stuff like just heavy protein overfeeding and fasting. That's largely what I've done. I don't even loosely track calories yet. I've continued to get slowly leaner, slowly making gains, although I've had a minor downward trickle in the scale. But really, it's just been kind of recomposition back and forth. My scale weight goes up and down a little bit just naturally. And I keep in mind, guys, I've been a much higher body fat power lifter previously. Also, I formerly was a fat guy. So again, the context, people have noted that. They're like, man, you've gotten quite a bit leaner. You still seem to be getting leaner. Gets pointed out with a lot of what I do. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not really at this point in the game actively cutting or bulking. I'm just kind of recompositioning, right? Staying in a certain weight range. But that's what happens, isn't it? You've seen everyone from Mike O'Hearn to others talk about that. So what do we mean? Well, your NEAT's going to regulate based around this stuff, okay? So anytime your calories drop a bit, as long as protein is kept really high, you're still in a good spot. You'll just downregulate activity a little bit, but you'll preserve muscle tissue. It's when people try to start burning body fat, they do these dramatic cuts, they start losing muscle. And what's the reality is that if you lose fat very, very slowly and you eat a lot of protein, we have plenty of data showing that muscle gain, small amounts of muscle gain is possible. Right? But we also have people, they try to lose a lot of weight. Now, if you want to lose like 20 pounds of body weight, yeah, if you try to do that in anything less than a year, you're going to lose some muscle tissue. But the other question becomes, why are we letting ourselves get that fat? Or we need to do that. So that's really a one-time thing. Like I would say to people, as long as you keep your diet on point, you really are only going to have that happen once. Like for me, I don't plan on really gaining body fat significantly ever again. So, I'll just probably still see a general downward trend, in body fat with what I'm doing these days. No need to really cut. Just keep getting leaner, keep chipping away at it. Okay. But that's what we see. As long as it's a very, very gradual loss, and everything's dialed in, all the data kind of shows that we can gain a little muscle instead of losing muscle. People lose muscle and strength on their cuts, right? They lose that, when the reality is if they just kept calories high and training really hard, they'd be fine. But we have the protein equation too, okay? When protein intakes start getting extremely high, like for me, guys, I shoot for like 300 plus grams of protein every day, right? And you do stuff like just fasting, you're going to tend to lean out a little bit over time, even on really high calories, because it's keeping your metabolic health really high, keeping all the nutrient partitioning high, the hormonal health really, really high, keeping everything in a good spot. Plenty of people who've done the same successfully. And I've seen people like my friend Alex Leaf write stuff on this, and who did his graduate work in these things. Hey, so the protein overfeeding, definitely part of it. Same thing, we're trying to bulk. When people have tried to bulk and they've protein overfeed, they lose body fat. We also look at the studies on weight gain, and what do we generally find? A super small surplus causes 100% of possible muscle growth. In other words, unless you're a rank novice lifter, your weight gain should be a pound or less per month. Now people say, that's too small to gain. It's like, well, are you worried you're going to lose some fat? Because again, the surpluses we've seen in the lab that show the ability to maximize muscle growth is not 10% surpluses. 10% surpluses cause fat gain in all people who had already been trained lifters every single time. But what we found is that when tiny surpluses were run, like as small as 3%, so that, guys, that's like 100 calories. It maximized all possible muscle growth, but just without the fat gain. So what I'm suggesting is you don't need to ever bulk. People say, but would there be an upward trend? Sure, you'll get to a point to where maybe your metabolic health gets to that point to where you may have a month where you gain a little fat and a little weight, but then you recomp a little when calories come down a hair. You'll see a general upward trend, but that's a long-term thing. Like if, let's say you're 170 pounds, 180 pounds. Yeah, and you want 10 pounds of muscle, you may need to go up to 190, but you don't need to bulk to get there. It could literally be, well, I put on 3 pounds this year. But then you put on 3 pounds of body weight that year and you end up 0.5% body fat leaner. Okay, it's all about just that long game, just continuing to chip away. Because that's what we're doing. We're playing the long game here. So that is what the evidence does show. It's not necessary for us to really do these strict bulks and cuts unless you are getting contest ripped. Okay? But for most of us who are just trying to say, look, I just want to be really jacked and I just want a nice six-pack, direction I'm going right now. Okay? I need the waistline to tighten up. We don't have to do any of that. And we can make gains year round. It's never this people like, well, if you cut fast, you can go back to gaining. Why aren't you gaining already? If you cut slow and you eat lots of protein and you train really hard and the training is dialed in, you're going to gain muscle anyways. And you shouldn't be bulking anyways. So then your gains should be lean when you do go to make gains. It's just not strictly necessary for us to do any of this. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.